It's my pleasure to invite Serena Joselle, Assistant Area Director, Public Affairs and Brand Communications for Kaiser Permanente South Bay Medical Center, to introduce our first speaker.
Good morning, everyone. So I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Senator Isidore Hall. Isidore Hall III, first elected to the California State Senate in December 2014, represents the 35th State Senate District, which includes Carson, Compton, Gardena, Harbor Gateway, Hawthorne, Inglewood, Lawndale, Linwood, North Long Beach, Rancho Dominguez, Rancho Palos Verdes, San Pedro, South Los Angeles, Torrance, Watts, Willowbrook, and Wilmington. Whew. It's a lot of ground to cover. Hall currently serves as chair of the Senate Governmental Organization Committee and serves on the Banking and Financial Institutions, Health, Insurance, and Public Employment and Retirement Committees. Previously, he represented California's 64th Assembly District from 2008 to 2014. Senator Hall has authored notable legislation and been an influential voice on various policy issues, including addressing the state's fiscal crisis, job creation, reducing childhood obesity and diabetes, improving public safety, expanding access to education technology, and the creation of a sustainable statewide water policy. Hall began his career of public service in 2001 when he was elected to the Compton Unified School District Board of Trustees. He served 2 terms as president of the board and oversaw important reforms to attract qualified teachers and increase funding to classrooms throughout the district. In 2003, Hall was elected to the Compton City Council, where he served in various leadership positions, including mayor pro tem. While on the City Council, he oversaw efforts to increase youth access to parks and recreational activities, reduce crime, and promote business growth throughout the city. Hall received a bachelor's degree in business administration from the University of Phoenix and a master's in public administration from National University. In 2011, he was awarded a master's degree in management and leadership from the University of Southern California and dual doctorates in theology and religious studies from Next Dimension Bible College. Hall is also a proud member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity. Please join me in welcoming Senator Isidore Hall.
Thank you. I had to comment to Steve Bradford because he's a member of Sigma fraternity. I don't even know how you even say that name, but I had to make sure that they didn't confuse it with Sigma. Give Steve Bradford a round of applause, who's also present with us today. Almer Asuchi is also present with us today, and my colleague, Assemblymember Hadley. Please give them a round of applause as well. You'll hear from them. Donna, Madam Chairwoman, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And let's give our Chairwoman another round of applause for doing an extraordinary job and being raised from or by a woman who raised 6 kids by herself. I can say this and be very confident about saying this, that if you want someone to really do the job well, give the job to a woman like Donna and she'll get it done. Let's give her another round of applause. Thank you. And I also want to thank the Board of Directors for the Torrance Area Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for your tireless work to create jobs and improve the economy, particularly the economic activity here in Torrance. And let's give our mayor, I saw our mayor here, there he is. Let's give our mayor, Pat Fury, a round of applause for his extraordinary work. Thank you as well. And let me just say to Donna and the board and to the Torrance business community that your work is actually paying off. I am proud to call you as a partner. And I'm proud to say that together Torrance is thriving and is being basically considered a beacon of hope, quite honestly, in the state of California, particularly in the state of California. And I believe that is in part because of the business community here in Torrance, but also the dynamic leadership of the Torrance City Council. Again, all of you deserve a round of applause. Mayor Fury and the Torrance City Council and the business community here together. Thank you. Obviously, 50% of Torrance is a community that I represent, which is the northern part. 50% of Torrance, the northern part of Torrance, I represent, and is obviously the heart and the economic engine of the 35th Senate District. And it's my honor to be your voice in Sacramento, fighting for jobs and job creation, economic development here in Torrance and throughout the South Bay. Standing here in 2016 is such a different picture than when I first began serving in the legislature along with Steve Bradford in 2008. In December 2008, California and our nation, we were on the brink of economic collapse. And I'm quite sure those of you present today remember those times. People were losing their jobs. People were losing their homes. People, quite honestly, were losing hope. The next few years were in my opinion, are some of the most challenging ever experienced by businesses and by the government, second only to the Great Depression, quite honestly. This time of challenge, if you recall, forced businesses to innovate, forced businesses to become smarter with their limited resources, and forced businesses to develop new business models to ensure long-term economic growth and long-term economic stability. The state of California was quite honestly forced to do the same. It wasn't an option. It was a necessity to tighten our belts. It was a necessity to innovate. It was a necessity to do more with less and to develop long-term strategic strategies to serve the public now and into the future. During that process, we were forced to make some painful cuts that impacted the poor, cuts that impacted the needy, and cuts that, quite honestly, in my opinion, haunt me today. But it was because of these cuts, my friends, and because of the leadership of those in Sacramento, the leadership of Governor Brown and the leadership of the voters who, quite honestly, passed Proposition 30 and most recently Proposition 1 and Proposition 2. And because of that, we're on a path to renovate in public education like never before, and a path to deal with the state's crippling drought, and a path to help businesses become most competitive in the world. And just this past year, we passed legislation to reinstate a bill that will allow businesses to receive incentives for locating and establishing their businesses right here in California. And I think the legislators in Hatley and many others deserve a round of applause for that. Now, I am proud to say that after several years of economic challenges, the California budget is balanced. And we do expect, of course, another balanced budget June 15. A budget that will invest in public education, a budget that will invest in job creation, that addresses the state's devastating drought, and a budget that puts California on the path to long-term economic growth. Aside from the budget, there are obviously a number of important issues that I'm working on in California. And I believe I saw Senator Ben Allen join us. Where's he? Let's give our senator a round of applause for being here. In education, the work I did on the passage of the local controlled funding formula created a generational change in how we fund public education. The LCFF recognized that children in foster care, poor students, and English language learners, students need more help in order to be successful. In the coming years, school districts, including many in the South Bay, will see dramatic increases in public funding to ensure that every student has a quality education and that no student in the South Bay is left behind. Not one student in the South Bay is left behind. This funding needs to be monitored closely, obviously, by each and every school districts in this district and be held accountable to make sure that all dollars that are sent to the districts from the state are monitored, that every dollar is accounted for, and that every dollar reaches the classroom to make sure that those students have the best and most necessary education possible. I am especially proud to say that, again, Senator Ben Allen and Autumn Burke and I worked closely this year to add emphasis on the need for school districts to spend more of its resources on vocational and career tech education. Every child is not going to go to college. And in my opinion, every child must have alternative paths of success. Career tech voc education is very important to our community and our economic stability here in the South Bay. Listen, when I was in high school, and perhaps some of you, I know I'm probably the oldest person in the room, but when I was I'm not going to say that, but when I was in high school, we had shop, something called shop, wood shop, metal shop, mechanic shop, paint shop. All type of shops. Shops have been taken out of schools today. Shops have been taken out of school today. And if you are a student in the 9th grade going into high school, and you know for certain that you are not going to go to an Ivy League school like Ben Allen did, the privileged one. I'm just saying, I'll keep it decent because the cameras are rolling. If you know for certain that you're not going to go to an Ivy League school like Ben Allen did, and college is not in your purview, right? I believe that students need an alternative path of success. And what SHOP did for us, for folks who were raised in Compton and Watts and South Los Angeles, it gave us, and USC does not count as an Ivy League school, Ben, so when you come up, don't dare say that. But for those who do not go to college, I believe career tech, VOTech gives you that alternative path of success. And it's similar to what we had when we were in high school. If you know for certain that you're not going to go to college, when we were in high school, we had SHOP. And when we graduated from high school, we had specific skills that would afford us an opportunity to graduate from high school, to be able to go into an industry, whether it's wood shop, machine shop, mechanic shop, and be able to obtain a career or lifestyle to be able to take care of our families. And I gotta tell you that the work that Ben Allen did and the work that Autumn Burke and I did this last year to make sure we invest billions of dollars in career tech voc education will change the scope of how young folks are educated in California. And I want to thank Ben Allen. He deserves a round of applause for that. But for me, it's obviously a no-brainer. And it is a desperately needed opportunity here in Torrance and in the South Bay. College obviously is very important to our economic strength, and I am proud, again, to call myself a Trojan. But the reality is, and let's face it, that every child is not going to go to college. And every child should not be forced to go to college. But when a child decides that he doesn't want to go to college, it's incumbent on us as legislators to make sure that there are alternative paths of success for our community to be successful. And what we as policymakers need to do is to understand that in this new economy, a technical skill can provide someone with a very successful career. I don't know the last time you called a plumber to your house, but I'll tell you this, but that is an industry that cannot be mechanicalized, if you will. That is an industry, when you call a plumber, you need a plumber to show up, and quite honestly, it's an industry that will pay one six figures, quite honestly, if they work hard. And the work that Jan Vogel is doing, let's give Jan Vogel a round of applause, is making sure that those specific skills training programs are embedded and interwoven into the fabric of the South Bay. He is educating thousands and thousands and thousands of people in career tech voc education, giving folks without hope an opportunity to be successful. Once again, let's give Jan Vogel another round of an applause. Many of the economic sectors in Torrance and the South Bay are asking for workers with specific technical training that cannot be obtained, quite honestly, in a 4-year university. The aerospace industry, for instance, is one of the many industries that have a long and proud history in the South Bay and that are looking to a new generation of worker to build and to communicate and to be able to build satellites of the next rocket or create the next rocket to Mars. I was meeting with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk said this. He said, Isidore, in order for us to be innovative, in order for us as a country to make sure that we're on a path to success, that we are competitive with other countries, we must not just focus on a 4-year or a 6-year university. We must focus on career tech, voc tech education. That is the new wave of success in order for the aerospace industry to be competitive in California and in the United States of America. And let me just say this, California is the leading state in the nation as it comes to aerospace and being most innovative as it relates to aerospace. The industry, the energy industry has been also a staple of the South Bay for generations and also for generations to come. Employs thousands and will continue to have an important role in supplying needed energy resources throughout the state for many years to come. There are but 2 sectors that are in desperate need of workers with technical skills development through career tech education. And let me just tell you that I am excited at what we'll be able to accomplish this session with the next generation of technical workforce. While we may just be up the road from the Port of LA and Long Beach, the vitality and the competitiveness also of our ports is critical to our state and our nation's economic recovery. California can bold itself by saying that the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach combined move approximately 40% of the nation's goods movement come through the Port of LA and the Port of Long Beach. If our ports are not protected, if our ports are not required to be innovative, if we do not protect our ports in California will be challenged. And let me tell you this, we are passing legislation each and every day in Sacramento to make sure that our ports are competitive, that we give them the tools to be innovative, and that they are protected so that they can be competitive and that California continue to thrive and be known as the 7th largest economy of the world. And that has to do a lot with what Mr. Hadley is doing as well as Ben Allen is doing in the legislature. And so I just want to also thank the folks here in the South Bay for supporting my piece of legislation that also requires equal pay for equal work. There is a gap in how women are paid in California. Unfortunately, women are paid 75 cents to the dollar, and then minorities are paid 64 cents to the dollar. I passed legislation just this year to make sure that there is not a single woman, regardless of your socioeconomic status, that will be paid less than your male counterpart. Men, I know you may be upset, but we passed legislation that basically says employers shall not and will not discriminate against women because they are women, and women will be paid the same as their counterpart males for the same pay for the same day's work. Women, I love you, and you are absolutely welcome for that. And my mother did not tell me to do it, by the way. But also last year I authored SB 63 and SB 399 that will help furthernize our ports. Governor Brown signed both bills into law last fall. SB 63 will give our ports the same financial tools that cities now have to finance infrastructure projects that will encourage new development along our waterfronts. The way you see the Port of Los Angeles, the way you see San Pedro waterfront, in 5 years, I need you to envision, if you can, will be totally transformed with economic development, housing, jobs, new infrastructure, businesses along that waterfront. With thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs to come, I would venture to say that the Port of LA and the San Pedro waterfront will be in a huge way most comparable to what you see in Santa Monica and other port areas, if you will, where economic development is thriving and robust. SB 39 is another bill I sponsored, and SB 39 will provide the City of Los Angeles with the regulatory tools to promote a new waterfront-related enhancement, not just in Los Angeles, but across the state of California. It would allow for waterfront-related enhancement, development, and economic opportunities while maintaining the integrity of the state's tideland trust. This bill will support bold actions taken by the City of Los Angeles to improve and better connect the Los Angeles waterfront area to tourists and the community, generate and enhance jobs, generate and enhance public and private investments, promote transit use, and create job and increase public access to our waterfronts. We have received strong support for this proposal from many in the business community, and I'm excited that this will be another tool to help encourage economic growth and stability in and around the state of California. And so I want to just thank each and every one of you for the opportunity to serve you in the California State Senate, to be your 35th district representative, and to make sure that whatever we do, if we do nothing else, that we preserve the economic vitality of small businesses in California. I am not ashamed to say that I believe that the small businesses in California is the economic engine that makes California work. And that's why I'm proud to say that I work with all of our mayors, all of our council members each and every day to make sure that the legislation that we are passing does not have an adverse economic impact on the cities that I serve. I am tired, quite honestly, of businesses saying to me that they are packing up, folding up, and moving out of the state of California. It's time that we turn that around and that we elect great representatives that will say enough is enough. We must keep our businesses in California. We must retain businesses in California, and we must also attract businesses in California that will employ California and that allow California to continue to be the 7th largest economy in the world. So again, thank you, each and every one of you, for the opportunity to be a representative. I look forward to a better year to come. God bless you, and thank you. Thank you.
I would like to invite Josh Lafarga, Director of Public and Government Affairs with the Laborers International Union of North America, Local 1309, up to the stage to introduce our next speaker.
We love Josh.
I think just you do. Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Decent breakfast, right? I actually like this breakfast. Real quick, hey, you know, most of the time you get there and you're like, do I really want to eat this food? This was okay. One more time, I want to give a big thank you to all the elected officials in here. Regardless of what level of government you're on, you know, past, present, thank you guys. You dedicate your lives to people. And are really, really underappreciated. Most people don't realize what you do, how much you dedicate. It's not a 9 to 5. You don't come in, clock out. You're working, you're always on the clock. So thank you guys. And also thank you to the staff. You know, big applause for the staff of every elected official. Those guys do tons of work, don't get any credit. Okay, so now back to program. I was told I was gonna get to introduce Senator Allen. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. I was like, okay, cool. I know Ben's a good guy. I could probably say a couple things. Then I got his bio. And it was like, dude, this is a short novel. It's like all these accomplishments, all these interests, all these talents. He has some pretty interesting talents too, by the way. But all I can do is bullet point a couple things for you. 2014, he was elected to the 26th Senate District. It's all the West Side, South Bay. going from Pacific Palisades to Palos Verdes Peninsula, from Venice to Hollywood. He currently serves as chair of the Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee, as well as the Joint Committee on the Arts. He's a member of the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, Budget Subcommittee on Education, Natural Resources and Water Committee, Transportation and Housing Committee, the Veterans Affairs Committee. Let's see, he's a former board member, former board president of the Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District, where at the school board they passed a $385 million bond measure. He also stabilized the city's funding for the schools. He's the executive board member, or was an executive board member for the LA County School Trustees Association. He was the chair of the LA County's Committee on School District Organizations. He led the successful launch of the Los Angeles Spark program. While in law school, he was a voting member for the University of California Board of Regents and was a judicial clerk with the United Nations International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. It's like, what? Ben worked for the National Democratic Institute for International Affairs, then as a communications director for Congressman Jose Serrano. He went to the Ivy League School of Harvard University, graduated magna cum laude. He got his Master of Philosophies from the University of Cambridge, and a Juris Doctorate from UC Berkeley. And he's also more Hispanic than I am, because this dude lived in Mexico and he speaks Spanish fluently. While Senator or future Congress member Isidore Hall is the best dressed man in politics, Ben is the most interesting man in politics. So with that, I have the honor of introducing Senator Ben Allen.
Oh my God. I should have put an end to that earlier. Well, thank you, Josh. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Thank you too to Isidore. It's always hard to go after Isidore. First of all, I represent Hollywood and the Pacific Design Center and all the fashion folks up in West Hollywood and everything else, and so it's really embarrassing to stand up after Isidore, who just really is the best dressed man in Sacramento by far. Though I'm trying to I got these nifty new glasses.
You look hot.
That, kind of cutting edge. I'm getting hip here. And so I'm trying to compete. It looks like Steve Napolitano's got the same thing. Now the one thing I have over Isidore and Napolitano is a great trait that I share with Donald Trump, and that's of course a little bit of hair. You got to take your victories where you can. That's all I can say. So, anyhow, I just want to thank everybody for this wonderful breakfast. Gorgeous spot. I will say that you really do trump the South Bay, the South Bay Chamber and Association of Cities, which has their event downstairs. We've got a much nicer view up here, so you should be happy about that. I want to give a shout out, of course, to my colleague David Hadley in the State Assembly, a former Assembly member Al Marasucci, who are both here. Good to see you guys. And obviously a great thanks to Josh Lafarga for his leadership in an extraordinarily important area of infrastructural development, and making sure that there are good working conditions for those people who are building the buildings, building the infrastructure, the waterworks, the transit systems, the roads, et cetera, that make our economy run. So let me just talk a little bit about the state of the state from my perspective. Things are looking much better than they were a few years ago. The economy has been moving at a much faster clip. Of course, there continue to be some potential storm clouds on the horizon. A lot of folks are concerned about the fact that we have not seen 7 years of uninterrupted economic growth in the last 400 years, and so we still just feel as though we're coming out of a recession. At the same time, unfortunately, we believe it or not, we've actually had 6 years of sustained economic growth over the last 6 years, and I think this is part of why the governor has been so concerned about keeping a tight lid on some of the proclivities of the legislature to spend more money. And so that's been an interesting and kind of fascinating tension. 2015, my first year on the job, was a whirlwind of activity for my staff and for me. It really is just the most fascinating job, and I really do hope that we can. A number of you have come up to Sacramento to see us, and I want to renew my call to you to come up, spend a little time with us. We'll bring you onto the floor of the Senate. We'll give you an opportunity to meet with my staff and just sort of see all the things that are happening there. It's a fascinating place. I've had a number of friends who've actually moved from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento because Washington is just such a mess. It's impossible to get anything done over there, and there actually there's a lot of optimism in Sacramento right now. The change in the budget rule, for example, from 2/3 down to a majority vote, has really raised the specter of the constant dysfunctionality of the city and of our state government, and made, I think, a really important change in terms of functionality there. And there's a lot of really interesting things happening. And of course, Sacramento, as California, is the 8th largest economy in the world, arguably the 7th largest economy in the world. We've got nearly 40 million people. So when we as a state government do things, it actually moves global markets in ways that no other state can. And that's also part of why it's exciting to be there. We certainly are on more solid footing with respect to our budget. An array of challenging issues continue and remain. A couple interesting things have just happened that we should report on. First of all, in the context of the MCO tax swap that was just passed with bipartisan support, both sides of the aisle, we were able to get a big chunk of funding for developmental disabilities, and that was something that was long time coming. I want to give a special shout out to Terry Nishimura, who's here with the PTN, just a wonderful organization. Pediatric Therapy Network that does so much work in assisting those children with special needs in our South Bay community, in our Torrance community. If you haven't had the opportunity to go over there, please do check them out. They also have some wonderful fundraisers and costume bashes and balls that I've seen many of you dressed up in ways that you shouldn't be. And never Isidore, though. Isidore's always so well dressed. But please do continue to support them. The state's now stepping up in a way that needed to happen, and I'm proud that we're all part of that effort. So, 2016 is going to be a very interesting year in the state legislature, and not just because it's an election year, which probably will not make anything easier, though perhaps a little bit more fun. But I just continue to kind of put my commitment out there to continue to listen, learn, and always strive to find common ground, even when there may be ideological differences that separate us. I think there are ultimately so much more that brings us together, and we need to particularly remember that within the context of an election year, when all sorts of crazy things are going to be said from both sides of the aisle, and accusations, and what unites us as Americans, what unites us as Californians, is so much more powerful than what divides us, and we have to continue to remember that and continue to put civility at the top of the chart with regards to the way we talk to each other and engage with each other. And I hope that we do that this year. It's going to be a difficult year, I fear, and we all have to come together and remember what unites us. So let me talk a little bit about a couple issues that Isidore has raised. I want to first start with the issue of the Southern California Regional Occupational Center. Isidore talked quite a bit about career technical education, and I'm very proud to have stood with him and Autumn and others who really fought so hard to make sure that this is an important part of our budget play. As many of you know firsthand, SCROC, the Southern California Regional Occupational Center, has over 300 business affiliates in the South Bay who participate in externships and on-the-job training and mock interview panels, and they conduct interviews on site for hiring. And every year, hundreds of SCROC attendees receive jobs in their selected career areas. And I'll say, if you haven't been down there, you got to go check it out. It really, it's like, those Richard Scarry books where you get to learn about how a house is built, and then, how the airport runs. That's really, you walk around SCROC and you get that sense. You're in an interaction design classroom, and then an automotive repair classroom, and cosmetics and haircutting and computer programming. It's this extraordinary range of skills that are being taught to our young people that are all so applicable and so directly related to career opportunities and job opportunities that are out there. Now, it was certainly one of my top priorities to try to see what we could do to secure, funding for SoCal Rock, to keep, its amazing doors open, and ultimately it got placed in this twilight zone. We were funding those sorts of programs through the ROP categoricals that were coming down through school districts. And then, the governor, in some of the cuts that were happening, in the context of the cuts that were happening a few years ago, basically got rid of a whole set of categoricals, which then ended the funding mechanism for SCROC, at least the funding mechanism that it was using. And so we've been struggling to try to find a new way to get continued funding for SCROC within the context of these changes. And I will say that we did make some progress this last year, not quite as much as we'd hoped. And I do want to thank my colleagues for your help in trying to make some of the more fundamental changes that we sought to get out of the legislature. But ultimately, we were able to work through the budget process and with some legislation to secure, at least a medium-term funding stream for SCROC. Our goal, of course, was for a long-term funding stream, and ultimately we ran into resistance from the Department of Finance that just we couldn't overcome through those avenues. But as with most things in Sacramento, there's usually another path to reach a desired solution, and we were very fortunate that this was the case. The good news is that we're now in line to receive a grant of more than $2 million from the state to continue the career technical education programming. And we certainly believe that this will be enough to keep the center open for the next couple of years at least. But looking ahead, my staff and the staff of the other members, and of course working closely with community members, we're gonna really have to work closely together to try to come up with a strategy to find stable funding that will be self-sustaining and less vulnerable to the budget's ups and downs. And I want to give a special shout out, of course, to Heidi Ashcraft, who's just been a wonderful champion for SCROC, and was one of the first people when I was running for office who really put it front and center on my radar screen. And she's someone who both understands the budget challenges and also the creativity that we're all going to have to put. We're all going to have to bring to bear in finding a long-term solution for this extraordinary institution that is sort of stuck in a budgetary twilight zone right now. And so we're going to need some smart folks and some folks who care about this institution to come together and help us. Now, speaking of long-term stable funding, as those of us in the region know all too well, California really has been failing to provide for our crumbling transportation infrastructure. And I was recently named as one of only 5 senators to our special committee, a conference committee for the special session on transportation. It sounds incredibly bureaucratic, and to some extent it has been. But we've been trying to put together a package to fix our roads and our highways and our bridges. It's absolutely critical. We're trying to find a solution. It's ultimately going to have to require a bipartisan vote because the solutions coming out of the committee will require 2/3 support. So that's been a real challenge. We'll see where that goes. But as many of you know, the average Angelino spends double the average American in car repairs because of how terrible our road quality is. And of course, that's extra inexcusable when you think of the fact that we have such nice weather. On the East Coast, but this is the actually interesting thing. On the East Coast, where they've got such punishing weather, where they're constantly having to salt the roads and deal with the potholes and everything else, because they're repairing the roads so much more frequently, they're actually saving a lot of money. Just like any kind of major repair in your house, the longer you let it go, the more expensive the repair is down the line oftentimes. And my English father always says, "A stitch in time saves 9." And the whole concept here is that if we're actually doing a better job at more regular maintenance and operation, we actually end up saving a lot of money. And this is kind of critical to the conversation we're having with regards to road repair. But as we know, building roads alone, particularly given the growth that we foresee for ourselves, will never solve our transportation problems in the South Bay. And that's why I'm also leading an effort to make sure that funding is included for transit projects, which is something that the governor neglected in his first draft of the proposal to the legislature, but that's at the core of the Senate's transportation proposal. And one of the things I know that folks here in Torrance care a great deal about is the extension of the Green Line. And Mayor Pat Fiore has been working hard on this. We actually were giving a round of applause. Mayor Fiore and I were just up at the Metro headquarters just a couple weeks ago, actually meeting with some of the leadership there on this. And I was glad to see Green Line extension included in the Metro plans. Way too far out from my perspective. We're going to have to work hard to get that higher up on the list, and then work together to get that measure passed in the fall. But it is on the long term, our love affair with the car is going to continue, but it's going to have to continue with a love affair for other options as well, because as you know, the congestion that we have all over our city and all over our region are really starting to eat away at some of our economic vitality and certainly our quality of life. So, as we mentioned, I'm actually on the committee that helps to deal with this, transportation and housing, which really does deal with two veritable crises that we have in Southern California that are interestingly interlocked. And one of the problems that we have is that we've got the worst housing affordability ratio in the nation. If you look at our housing costs and what we're actually being paid, the housing costs in San Francisco are higher than in LA, but they're getting paid a lot more than we are, partly because of all the success of the tech sector there. And of course, as a result, people, and partly because of the way that our city's designed and some of our planning challenges, people are having to live further and further and further away from work just to be able to afford a place to live. And as a result, they're now clogging our roads so much more. And so the problem is interlocked. And we also deal with homelessness as a part of that conversation. Those folks who get really squeezed ultimately by these affordability challenges end up on the streets, and we all know how expensive that can be. And one of the things we're trying to do is come up with more solutions to get people into supportive housing. One of the extraordinary things is, people don't really think about this, the state of Utah studied their homeless problem, and they actually found out that they were spending about 3 times, it actually costs 3 times more for a homeless person to be out on the street than in supportive housing. That was fully funded by the state. And Utah, which is not known for its budgetary profligacy, decided to actually do a housing first model that put all of their homeless folks into housing. Now, it was, not every single person's in there. Some of these folks are kind of in extreme mental health states, and it's hard to do that. But for the big bulk of their homeless population, they were able to get them into housing and actually save a lot of money as a result. It was amazing to me when you actually see the breakdown of the public service costs associated with every single homeless person on the street, from police calls to sanitation to public health services. How much harder it is to provide the services that person needs when they're on the street rather than when they're in a supportive housing context. So let me mention one committee that I'm very proud of and that's been very interesting to serve on. I'm the vice chair of our Senate Select Committee on Defense and Aerospace. And this lends support to those important industries that provide jobs that are so integral to the economy of our region. And Isidore mentioned the issue of aerospace and how extraordinary it is. And it really, when you break it down, it is amazing. I mean, California is home to a wide array of unparalleled aerospace-related assets. And we all know we continue to be a pioneer in aviation, space travel, satellites. You mentioned Elon Musk, unmanned aerial vehicles, academic and applied research. And yet currently within California government, there is no official unified voice advocating on behalf of aerospace interests. Now, meanwhile, there are literally hundreds of boards, councils, and commissions that are chartered under California law. And one of the things we constantly seem to be doing is approving all of these gubernatorial nominees and appointments to all these various boards and commissions. Now, we've got, in the agriculture industry alone, we've got a salmon council. We've got a rice research board. We have separate asparagus, avocado, and strawberry commissions. There are varying smells associated with all of those. Now, I've got nothing against the strawberry commission or the asparagus commission.
Talk about it, man.
They eat very well. But economic studies estimate that California's aerospace industry generates annual revenues that are roughly equivalent to those of our agriculture and our entertainment industries combined. So that's why I have authored Senate Bill 1215, which will establish a California Aerospace Commission, which will unite leaders from a variety of aerospace-related fields to pursue the objective of making California the undisputed worldwide epicenter of commercial, academic, and government-related aerospace activities. So our plan is for the commission to be made up of civil, commercial, defense sectors drawn from geographically diverse regions of the state, appointed by the governor, assembly, and the Senate. The plan would be for it to act as a clearinghouse and a point of contact for aerospace-related issues and information. It will identify and recommend changes in federal, state, and local statutes and regulations that will enhance the development of aerospace-related activities throughout California. And it will report to the legislature and governor on economic and employment impacts, provide strategic planning documents, and also make recommendations for appropriate government policy that supports and enhances aerospace-related activities. I think that with the right investment and economic policies, California really can continue to be a worldwide leader in research, development, manufacturing, deployment of aerospace technologies for decades to come. One of the things that we talk about a lot in this context is how, California does have high costs, and there are a lot of regulatory burdens. But there are also unique opportunities here that are so different than what exists in other parts of the country. And there's been a lot of, some people may have heard me talk about this in the past. There's been talk about closing down the LA Air Force Base that we have here in El Segundo, that is this extraordinary urban military base. And why? Well, ultimately, all these costs, these housing costs, these transportation costs, are really eating away at the quality of life and at the profitability, or at least the economic viability of that base. And yet, if you look not only at all of the extraordinary partnerships that exist with regards to that base, from UCLA and LMU, and yes, even USC, and JPL and all the follow-on corporations and vendors that work with the base, from Raytheon to Boeing to Lockheed to Northrop, and some of the smaller missile systems and NASA and SpaceX. I also worry. I worry that if we, as a nation, pick up our military bases that exist in cities and move them off to the countryside, to the rural parts of the country, just because the costs are lower, that this really sacred social compact that exists between our society and our military might start to strain a little bit. I mean, already we are so divided. We've got red and blue and rural and urban and left and right and all this stuff. And more and more Americans live in our cities. And most Americans live in and around cities. And it's so important for our military to know and love and engage with urban life. And it's also so important for our urban residents and our folks living in cities to feel ownership and engagement with our military. And it's another one of, it's kind of my Santa Monica touchy-feely reason for wanting to keep that Air Force Base here. And we all know how important it is for the South Bay. Let me just mention a couple other bills that I'm working on. We all work on so many bills, but a couple I want to just mention. One of them, of course, is this methane gas leak up at Porter Ranch. And I don't know if anyone saw in the paper today, it turns out there's a lot more leaks happening in gas facilities than any of us even knew. A little scary. We even had, up here in Playa, kind of Westchester, Playa Vista area, there's a gas facility that is of similar age to the one at Porter Ranch that use some of the same kind of technology. I've got a bill that seeks to, it's SB 888, that seeks to improve coordination among the 7 state agencies responding to future leaks by designating the Office of Emergency Services as the lead agency and requiring that the fines paid by the party responsible for a leak are not borne by the ratepayers and are used to mitigate environmental impacts. And one of the things we found that we had 9 different agencies trying to respond to various aspects of the leak, and it was like a headless chicken running around. And so we're going to try to make sure that we have a kind of a lead and that there's a much more clear line of reporting. One of the things that happened up there is that Southern California Gas waited for about a week before deciding that it was a problem to tell the government agency about, and that's going to have to stop. They got to let them. The second something like this happens, they got to tell the agency immediately. Let the agency determine whether there's a serious problem on our hands. I kind of wonder to myself whether we could have solved some of the problems that took place there if we'd had a little bit earlier notice. Let me also mention SB 933, which addresses California's really serious teacher shortage problem. I can't believe we're now in a teacher shortage problem, by the way, after all the cuts we had to make. We were laying all these people off. Now all of a sudden we got a teacher shortage problem. But this is all about trying to recruit, train, and retain teachers through teacher residency and mentoring programs. Enrollment in teacher preparation programs at our state universities plunged 75% from 2001 to 2014. This is a serious problem, real problem. And one of the interesting things that we find is that there's enormous, even if we get them into the profession to start, we have a huge retention problem where something like 2/3 of all those teachers who leave leave for, I think actually 75% actually, leave for reasons other than retirement. So we've got a retention problem. Studies show that teachers enrolled in residency programs are 50% more likely to stay in the profession. That's if they have a caring mentor teacher who can work with them and engage with them and give them the support that they need to to be able to hit the ground running and feel prepared. One of the problems is that when we go in and we interview a lot of those teachers who leave the profession voluntarily is that they basically felt woefully unprepared. And we give residencies to doctors. We make sure that they're going in there very fully prepared. We need to do the same for teachers. Let me also mention our response to the Refugio oil spill. We actually had we have a select committee that we formed with relation to this oil spill that took place up in Santa Barbara that, as we all know, impacted the South Bay when these tar balls started showing up on our coastline right here. And we had a hearing about this in Manhattan Beach to talk about the impacts on Los Angeles. And it turned out that I was just shocked by how little some of the people, including the business owners right along the beach who work on coastal issues, who work on beach recreation, how little they knew about what was happening. We had a surf shop owner, in fact, who basically came up and said that he didn't even know that what these tar balls were related to an oil spill. And so we've got a bill, SB 1083, that basically focuses on communications and makes sure that the government agencies that are working on spill response and prevention are providing timely and accurate information about future spills to the communities that are impacted. I should say, if any of you are involved with a business that was negatively impacted by the spill, there is a process for getting compensation, and our office is happy to help you with learning about that process. We had an excellent presentation at the hearing from a UCLA law professor who broke down what businesses need to do, and she's been making presentations around the South Bay so that folks understand what their rights are under the law. So, outside of legislation, my team and my full-time staff is headquartered right here in the South Bay, led by my Deputy Chief of Staff, Sam Liu. Lila Calif is here as well, who's on my staff. They're working day in and day out, making connections between this chamber, its members, and our Byzantine state government. We really do work hard for you. We try our best, and we do strive to be a key resource for you as you continue to do business in the Golden State. And I just do encourage you to be in touch with us. If you have challenges, if you have problems, if you have things, little tweaks to the law that you think we ought to be considering as a change that could make things better for the business climate here. If there are problems you're having with a government agency that you think we can help out with, please do be in touch with us, because we do work for you. We're anxious to make sure that the business climate in this district and this community is extraordinarily competitive and strong, because we know how much you do in providing the key jobs and social mobility opportunities for so many of our residents, so many of our citizens. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your continued advocacy, and I really do appreciate everything you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Allen. I certainly can't follow that energy, so I won't make an attempt. But I do have the privilege of introducing Rob Van Langen, who is the president of Van Langen Towing, also an executive board member at the Chamber, and the chairman of the Chamber's Governmental Affairs Policy Group, to introduce our final speaker for today.
Thank you, Jack. Assemblyman David Hadley was elected to represent the 66th Assembly District in November of 2014. Born and raised in Fullerton, he attended high school in Anaheim. David completed his bachelor's degree at Dartmouth College and his master's degree at the London School of Economics. David and his wife Suzanne moved to the South Bay 18 years ago, and in 1999 he founded Hadley Partners Incorporated, HPI. HPI is a firm that specializes in representing entrepreneurial and family-owned businesses in the financing or sale of their companies. Since its founding, HPI has advised well over 100 businesses. HPI clients have created thousands of jobs, in part due to the help that David and his colleagues provided. David and his wife Suzanne have been married for over 22 years, and they are the proud parents of 4 children. Their 21-year-old son, Jack, is in his 3rd year at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Their 3 daughters are Claire, Ellen, and Faith. Claire just started her 1st year at the College of William & Mary on a gymnastics scholarship. Ellen and Faith are students at Maricosta High School. David chose to get involved in local politics and ultimately to run for the California State Assembly, because while California continues to enjoy tremendous opportunities, we will be the first generation in the history of California to leave the state to our children in a more precarious condition than we received it from our parents, if we do not pursue common sense policies. David is committed to ensuring that his children and you and your children and grandchildren have the same opportunities to build your futures in California that David and his brothers and sisters did. California can once again be the Golden State. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Assemblyman David Hadley.
Well, just so you know, you are looking at neither the best dressed nor the most interesting man in Sacramento. So, it's also very hard to follow Senators Hall and Allen because there's usually nobody left in the audience to give a shout out to. So I scan the room, I look for somebody who is hiding behind the camera or maybe a bathroom break. But we do have with us a birthday boy, Steve Napolitano. I just don't know how Senator Hall's staff missed that one. And my wife Suzanne is here with me today. Happy to be home sleeping in my own bed this week. It's spring recess in Sacramento, if you can't tell from the presence of all three of us down here today. So thanks, Suzanne, for coming. The first thing I want to say is that I am here both as your assemblyman, but also as a small businessman. I started my own business in 1999. It was one of the hardest things I have done, also one of the most rewarding things I've done, and I'm very glad I did it. But I definitely remember making hard decisions in the early years of the business about whether we're going to put more money in and go another 6 months or 9 months with no income while we hope we can make a go of this. So I have definitely lived in the shoes of so many of the entrepreneurs and the business people who are in this room. And I want you to know that you have a legislator in Sacramento who not only understands many of the issues that you're dealing with, but that I've lived them as well. And so I'm proud to be representing the business community. I want to thank my colleagues, my tough acts to follow, as they say, Senators Hall and Allen. Last year we were in our first year in the legislature. Senator Allen and I both, for the first time, Senator Hall was new to the Senate, although not new to the legislature. And I just want to provide one great example of what hard work and bipartisan cooperation can get you in less than a year and a half. And actually we're up elevated, so some of you might be able to see it if the curtains are open. That's snowpack. When I was sworn in, there was no snow in the Sierra Nevadas. And today, we're in a much better position. So I'm considering running on a slogan of promises made, promises kept. Pray for just a little more green weather and I can run with that. But let me talk a little bit about the business climate. And I want to return briefly to a theme that I talked about at this gathering last year. And I know you folks are all so busy and we're all running around, but I think it's important to focus on what our challenges are. And that is the notion that we have two distinct economies in California. CEO Magazine, for 8 or 9 or 10 years running, has been calling California the worst place in the United States to do business. But other magazines, like Business Insider magazine, rank California in the top 5 states in the country to do business. How can that possibly be the case? And the reality is that both are right. We really have two economies in California. We have an incredibly productive, incredibly profitable intellectual property economy in pockets of coastal California. And that economy benefits from two things. One that not even the legislature can screw up, which is that coastal California is such an amazing place to live, that talented people, people who have STEM degrees, people who have masters in computer science and doctorates in chemistry and so on, can make a great living anywhere in the world. And if you can do that, why wouldn't you make it in coastal California? We live in such a special place, and we should never forget how fortunate we are to be where we are. And there is a second piece, which is not luck. This is a product of good fortune, but also hard work and vision, which is that California is home to the greatest cluster of research universities anywhere in the world. And I've learned that anytime I pick out any few of them, I make somebody else mad. So, I won't mention all of them, but from Stanford and Davis and Berkeley and so on in the north to USC and UCLA and Caltech and Long Beach State and so on down here, we are graduating talented STEM degreed professionals every year who inhabit this tech industry and do great by California. But if you're in the business of making anything, moving anything, growing anything, or extracting anything in California, there is no harder place to make a living. There is no harder place to achieve a middle-class lifestyle so that your employees can live closer, as Senator Allen said, closer than an hour and a half or 2 hours to their place of work, so that your kids can go to quality public schools. We have some of the best public schools in the state here in the South Bay. That's why Suzanne and I moved here 20 years ago. But overall, California ranks in the bottom 10% of the country in terms of public schools. And so if you live not too far north, not too far east of here, your educational outcomes are too often not good enough to meet the demands of the 21st century economy. So what we need to do in Sacramento is we really need to focus on economic policies that result in broadly shared prosperity. We cannot think that regulations that work for Apple and Google and Amgen, wildly profitable, globally competitive economies, are also going to work for many of the small and medium-sized manufacturing companies, agricultural businesses, businesses that consume electricity, businesses that need water, businesses that can't deal with a very, very difficult wage and hour regimen, product liability regimen, workers' comp regimen, all of these things. And my hope, the reason I like to talk about these two economies in California is that my hope is that I can inspire residents, activists, policymakers to understand that we need to understand the problem well enough to write laws, to write regulations that will allow the aerospace manufacturers of the South Bay to do just as well as the software companies of the South Bay, because we need both. So let me talk about a few bills from last year, and then I will talk about a few things I'm working on going forward. Two bills I'd like to talk about from last year. There were 2,300 bills introduced last year, so I had a lot to choose from. But I'll talk about two. One is SB 350, which was one of the most significant pieces of legislation in Sacramento last year. This was a bill introduced by the leader of the Senate, Senator Kevin De Leon, and supported by the governor, really a carbon agenda bill for the next 20 years in California. And it had three pieces to it. It had a renewable electricity component, it had a building energy efficiency component, and it had a petroleum component to it. And I had a very interesting role in this bill. I voted twice against this bill in committee. This bill was passed on virtually a straight party line vote in several committees, as well as out of the Senate where the bill originated. I voted against this bill twice because while I supported many of the goals of the bill, I believed that the petroleum provisions in particular would have devastated whole regions of the state. This bill would have required a 50% reduction in transportation fuel in California in less than 15 years. And when you consider that the average car in California is almost 10 years old and that people do not turn over their cars quickly, the end result of that attempted reduction in 15 years would have been devastating to millions of Californians. And so in its unamended form, I opposed this bill twice and tried to be part of the coalition to improve this bill and to try to achieve the objectives we could achieve without being overly punitive economically to much of the state. And I'm proud to also say that I was able to vote for the final bill. I supported SB 350 in its climactic vote on the floor of the Assembly because we were able to amend the bill and I think achieve a better balance between our environmental goals and our economic realities. And we have differences on policy, obviously, within this room as well as around the state. But I hope that one of the things I bring to the South Bay as well as to the legislature is that I'm not somebody who's afraid to say no. I am willing to fight for my constituents. I'm willing to fight for economic reality. I'm willing to fight against some of the pieties of politics when they are politically convenient, but they're not based in reality. But I'm also not afraid to say yes. And we do need legislators who can compromise, who can work across the aisle, who can get the best that is available, even if it's not perfect, and continue to move forward. So I'm proud of the role I played on that bill. I believe I am the only member of either house of the legislature to have voted against the bill in committee and to have voted for the final product. And I think that the final product was a worthwhile compromise that advanced our environmental agenda in California without unduly burdening our residents and our consumers. And I'm just turning on my phone again because it's my stopwatch, and I don't want to run out of time here. Second bill I'm very proud of is AB 306. This is a bill I authored and that I'm very proud to have had Senator Allen as a co-author. You know, I'm not disappointed that Senator Hall had to leave to another engagement because he didn't co-author the bill. So I've got my colleague here. You know, we all know how important the LA Air Force Base is to the South Bay and to the greater Southland region. And what AB 306 did was it greatly improved public school options for the children of our active duty military personnel, both around the state of California, but also to the benefit of LA Air Force Base. And just to put that in real world terms, the base housing for LA Air Force Base is at Fort MacArthur in San Pedro, which is in LA Unified School District. And we have some amazing school districts in the South Bay. LA Unified has a lot of great teachers and a lot of dedicated parents, but statistically it is failing far too many of its students. And parents, particularly, remember we have a volunteer military, active duty military personnel who are considering an assignment to the LA Air Force Base. One of the first things they're thinking about is how are their kids going to be educated. And what AB 306 does is it allows the children of active duty military personnel to seek the public school that is right for them without asking permission from the resident school district. And so we already have, probably the most gratifying part of my job has been the emails I have gotten in the last couple of months from military families living in San Pedro who have their kids enrolling in Palos Verdes schools in August of 2016, who have found out that although they can no longer afford to live in the South Bay, that they can keep their kids in the schools that they're already in. It was not only the right thing to do for our military families, but it was the right thing to do for the LA Air Force Base, and our schools, our communities are going to be enriched by those military service kids who were sitting next to them in their classrooms. So I was really proud to have authored that bill. I was very grateful to Senator Allen for his co-authorship, and this bill would not have become law without the work of Senator Allen and Assemblywoman Autumn Burke. And this is not a political gathering, but I do want to emphasize both my co-authors are in the opposite party from me, and we work together to do the right thing for the South Bay, and I'm very grateful to them and to the legislature. A few bills I've introduced this year, just to cover a few. One of the biggest problems that both of my predecessors have discussed is the cost of housing. And this is not rocket science. This is economics 101. Housing is so expensive in Southern California because we have a lack of supply. And part of the reason we have a lack of supply is that we have an incredibly desirable place, and we don't want to overbuild our coast. We don't want to overbuild our communities. Housing will always be more expensive in LA than it is in Iowa, just because of the demand of people to live here. But part of the reason that it's expensive is that we can't build any damn housing in Los Angeles. It takes years and sometimes decades to get legal approval to build anything. And I've introduced a bill, AB 2026, which does what I think most of you will consider to be common sense, which is that it requires the parties to a certain category of lawsuits to simply identify themselves. The only area of state law where people can file lawsuits anonymously in California is in relation to the California Environmental Quality Act. And what this does is it allows competing developers, it allows labor unions who are seeking project labor agreements, it allows people who don't have legitimate environmental reasons to oppose projects to tie them up in litigation endlessly without simply identifying themselves. So I'm not here to try to solve all the competing problems of development in California. That's a very big job, and it's no one person's job. But I am here to improve our legal framework so that at least the parties who are having a fight know who they're fighting with. And it is a statement about some of the gridlock on this issue in California that, in my opinion, something as common sense as this has not become law. But I'm advancing this year, and I hope that we can at least make it possible to have honest discussions about development in California, which I think is part of the way we will improve our ability to build housing that is so desperately needed. We cannot subsidize our way out of our housing crisis. There are people who need state help, and Senator Allen mentioned the homeless. And they obviously need state support to get their lives together again. But middle-class families in California, there is not enough money in the world to subsidize their way into middle-class housing. We need to turn the market loose. We need to allow housing to get built in an environmentally responsible way, but also in a way where folks who don't have legitimate reasons to object to a particular project have to identify themselves. I'll talk briefly about one more piece of legislation, mostly because I think it may surprise people that somebody from my party is introducing this legislation, but it's part of my project in Sacramento. Many of you may be familiar with the Volkswagen emissions scandal. Volkswagen, the global automobile company, has been fraudulently selling diesel cars in California, in the US, around the world for years by tricking regulators about how much they emit in terms of particulate matter, pollution. And this Volkswagen sells cars around the world, and they're regulated by regulators in every state and around the world. And they have been tricking regulators for close to 10 years on this matter. And we're not talking about small around the edges. They have installed in their cars software that runs the car differently when it's being tested by regulators versus when it's being driven on the road in real world conditions. Among all the regulatory bodies in the world, the California Air Resources Board was the only one, the first one, that had the tenacity and the technical expertise to figure out that Volkswagen was doing this wrong, to listen to their explanations, to continue to work it, and finally Volkswagen ran out of explanations and admitted the degree of the fraud that had taken place. And and I'm a Republican. I'm in the minority party. My party in certain circles has a very bad reputation for environmental stewardship. And I've introduced a resolution in the legislature to recognize and commend the Air Resources Board for distinguishing itself among all the regulatory bodies in the world in uncovering this for the benefit of all the people who breathe air in California, but also around the world. And I believe that one of the biggest things we're missing in the legislature is oversight. we're really good at introducing bills, writing laws, sending them to the governor. We're not very good at following up in seeing how our bills, how our laws are being executed, what impact they're having on California, and how the executive branch is administering those laws. So I'm really proud to recognize the Air Resources Board for doing extraordinary work, but the other side of that same coin is that I'm calling on my colleagues in the legislature on a bipartisan basis to engage in much more oversight of the executive branch and to recognize the good, but to call them out on the bad. And we should be spending less time writing new bills, and we should be spending more time figuring out if the tens of thousands of pages of legal code in California are helping or hurting the business community, the students, the teachers, the environmental stewards, the nonprofits, all the different sectors of our economy. So I'm proud to try to change the discussion a little bit on that. And finally, because it's important to me and because both of my predecessors have discussed it, on this whole question of vocational and career technical education. In my opinion, one of the reasons, and this is the only comment I'm going to make about national politics, one of the reasons that we have a remarkable number of people under 30 years old voting for Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, or not voting at all, is that we have really shafted a lot of young people in this country. The majority of young people in this country will not get four-year college degrees. And what are we giving them? We're giving them very little in the way of vocational training. We're giving them housing that is too expensive to secure when they try to leave home, whatever schooling they do finish, whatever job they can find when they finish that schooling. We have made it very, very hard for young people. I won't even get into the debts we're leaving them and the infrastructure we haven't taken care of. And the vocational training this is not a sidebar conversation in education. This is really central to the future of either a significant minority or an outright majority of the young people of California. And I would take a somewhat different view of what we've accomplished in the legislature on this. We did get some good work done. We got a 3-year grant program for vocational training done that Senator Allen mentioned, and SoCal Rock is participating in that grant, and that's a great thing, and I'm really proud to have supported that, and I thank Senator Allen for his leadership on it. But don't misunderstand me. This 3-year grant program is not a transition to a system that's working. This is a lifeline to give us 3 years to fix a system that is not fixed. And so for all policymakers, we have a lot to do to make sure that next generation of Californians gets the skills they need, whether it is an Ivy League degree or whether it is a vocational training set of skills to make a future in California. And now I'm going to, advertise the next event. Of course, if you're the last speaker, you always have to do that. I believe that the foundation of the South Bay, the reason for our strong economy, the reason for our vibrant communities, is our public schools. That's why Suzanne and I moved here. I know that's why so many of you moved here. And tonight at 6:30 in Manhattan Beach at Miracosta, Senator Allen and I are participating in a roundtable forum on public schools and education in California. But my single biggest goal in the educational world is that the parents of Gardena, the parents of Lomita, the parents of San Pedro have the same right to form their own locally controlled school districts and the same right to control the educational destinies of their kids as the parents of Torrance do, the parents of Redondo Beach, PV, Manhattan, all over the South Bay, El Segundo, et cetera. But I'm here to protect the public schools of the South Bay, to extend the local control that has worked so well in the South Bay. And if you want to hear more about that tonight, you can come to Miracosta's gymnasium. Thank you, all of you, for being here. I'm a small businessman. I know how hard small business is. I was a chamber member, but I certainly wasn't making it to many 8:30 events, particularly when they ran too long. So thank you all for coming. My district director, Sarah Wiltfong, is in the back, and we have really tried to work hard to represent the whole South Bay. So if you need Sarah or me at any time, please reach out. And thank you very much for coming.
incredible morning. Thank you all to our speakers for the wonderful updates you gave us, for what has been happening and what there is to look forward to that's coming. I would do injustice to highlight them all, but I did make some fast and furious notes. So thank you for the updates on education and all the things that are happening, both in creating a successful path forward for our students pursuing higher education and for those who are maybe going to pursue a vocational education pathway. Also, we heard about transportation and military family choices for students, housing developments, but I have to say my vegan friends are really going to be excited to hear about the asparagus committee. So I'm really excited to take that back. So thank you for that little tip. I also wanted to say thank you again to our corporate sponsors for supporting the event today. Our distinguished sponsors being Kaiser Permanente, ExxonMobil Corporation, and the Laborers International Union of North America. Thanks to Linda Amato and the incredible DoubleTree staff for hosting us and taking care of us today. Thank you to Torrance City Cable for airing the event and the Daily Breeze for covering today's event. To Suzanne Herring for providing the decorations on stage today. And of course to our incredible Chamber President and CEO Donna Duperon and the amazing Torrance Chamber staff that works so incredibly hard behind the scenes to make today what it is, which is an incredible event. And Senator Ben Allen, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to leave us all with a quote today. If you know me, you know I love quotes, so this is one that's being added to my list. As we leave today, I hope we all travel safely and take this little bit of advice: listen, learn, and seek to find common ground. Have a great day.